Ever think about, like, if you could time travel,
Hmm.
where would you go? What would you see?
So many possibilities.
Right. I think for me, 1830s New Zealand would be up there. It's a crazy time, a clash of cultures, shifting power dynamics, and there's this film, The Convert, that tries to capture it all.
The Convert, yeah, I've heard of it. Mixed reviews, right?
Oh, exactly. Some critics loved it, some not so much.
Okay.
Like Monica Castillo, she thought it was really powerful. But then you have Eddie Harrison. He said it was more for like history buffs.
Interesting. So what's the deep dive today? The Convert, or
We're going beyond the film. We're using it as a jumping off point to explore the real deal, the actual history behind it. We're talking musket wars.
the Musket Wars. Now that's a story. A real turning point in New Zealand's history.
Okay, so for those of us who need a little refresher, what were the musket wars?
Well, imagine this. You have Maori tribes living for centuries with their own complex social structures, their own ways of war, and then, boom, European traders show up with muskets.
Game change.
Totally. These muskets were like nothing the Maori had ever seen before. Suddenly, the rules of engagement were completely rewritten. It led to these massive intertribal conflicts, the Musket Wars.
So, like, in the film, you have this British preacher, Thomas Munro, arriving in New Zealand right in the middle of all this. What was it actually like for someone stepping into that world?
Intense. To really understand, you got to picture the Maori society before the muskets. They were organized into iwi, these tribes with their own hierarchies, alliances, rivalries. Everything was interconnected. And then these muskets come in and just throw everything into chaos. Power shifts, new alliances, devastating
And that's
losses.
kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? Like the impact of a new technology on an entire society.
Yeah, it was a period of massive upheaval. And then on top of all that, you have the British arriving, starting to colonize the land, talk about a recipe for conflict, land disputes, resource clashes, cultural misunderstanding. It was a powder keg.
And the film touches on this, right? The tension between the Maori and the British settlers.
It does, but the real history is way more complex. The film focuses on this one preacher, but the reality involves so many different players, motivations, perspectives.
Right, right. And speaking of the preacher, the film makes a big deal about the spread of Christianity. How much did that actually contribute to the tension?
Well, it's complicated. You had missionaries like Thomas Monroe trying to convert the Maori. But the Maoris weren't just passive recipients. They were actively engaging with this new religion, trying to figure out how it fit or didn't fit with their own beliefs and traditions.
So it wasn't just a one-way street.
Exactly. It was this dynamic process of cultural exchange, negotiation, and sometimes resistance. The film kind of simplifies it, but the reality was much messier and more interesting.
So we've got the convert, which gives us this fictionalized glimpse.
Mm,
But then we have the real history, the Musket Wars, the impact of British colonization. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
it does. Like, what if those muskets had never shown up? How would things have played out differently? What would Maori society look like today?
It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.